listen to what is coming, because I have done my homework on this. The reason why bonds are so cheap and the stock market is going down and Bitcoin is getting down is because people who have a lot of money are starting to sell because they are expecting, or at least fearing, a major crash, not just a minor correction. And they're starting to cycle out of these things. This is not normal. They're trying to find someplace safe for their money. Now, if you remember that after the Great Recession, which happened in 2008, there's a lot of changes that happened to the financial markets and to the banks. And one of them that you may not be aware of is Uncle Sam changed their rules for federally insured pensions, requiring them to keep a minimum percentage of overall holdings in U.S. Treasury bonds. So what Uncle Sam said was, fine, you want us to have your back, you have to have our back, you have to buy bonds. The reason why they did that is because they knew the rest of the world was going to start not buying our bonds. And that has happened in the last few years. In fact, the Fed has been the number one buyer of U.S. bonds since June of 2020. In the fourth quarter of 2020, the Fed purchased 125% of the bonds that were put up for auction. Usually China buys some, Japan buys some, et cetera, et cetera. They're not only not buying them, they're selling them. And they are getting out of the American business. The Fed not only bought all of the bonds for our debt that went up for auction, but they bought the bonds that others were putting up for sale saying, I don't really want anything to do with America. I don't think this is a safe investment anymore. Now, I covered this 2 years ago because not only did the Fed buy all the bonds offered by the Treasury, but it also virtually all bonds that were offered by sale for major institutions, the big banks, etc. The Fed's balance sheet ballooned from 3.7 trillion that they told us to 8 trillion from the second half of 2020 to September of 2021. That is much more than 100% more on their books. All right. Where are they getting all of this money? The really important thing that you need to know, and I urge you, please, I know people want it in hardcover or paperback, and I think it's so important that you get the Great Reset in hardcover, because you're going to be able to highlight and everything else that I just don't think is as effective in digital. But get the Kindle version. The audio, we're just waiting for Amazon to approve to be able to post it. It's all done. Everything's in. You know, they told us yesterday or 2 days ago that it might take as long as 2 months to post. We're like, really? Because that's new. But we're hoping that it will be any day that they post the audio version. But please do your homework on this. Time is of the essence. The Great Reset, for this to work, they have to have money to continue to flow into our financial institutions, our banks, Wall Street, and the government. It is essential that that happens. Cheap cash is the fuel for the reset machine. Without it, the Great Reset stops working. This is why I've said, take your money into a local credit union or a local bank. Credit union is probably better than a bank, but if you know that they keep all of their loans local and they're investing in your community, I think that's a really good thing. But get your money out of these big banks. Everything the Fed does from this point, in my opinion, will be designed to make it look like they're fighting inflation. But what they're really doing is keeping money pouring into the financial system, most likely through backdoor channels that nobody understands or is talking about. And one of those backdoor channels that nobody seems to understand or pay attention to is the Fed's lending. Now, this is something I've talked to you since 2019. Something is really wrong. Really wrong. We found out last week from a Freedom of Information Act that the Fed's lending from 2008 to 2010, what they bought from the banks, we were told it was $5 trillion. But the Fed has a 2-year moratorium. You can't ask them any questions for 2 years. That seems fair, right? At 2012, they fought it all the way to the Supreme Court to keep what they did secret until 2022, and they said it was a matter of national security. Supreme Court bought it. Well, it's 2022. Now we can know. Came out last week. Why have you not heard this from anyone else in the news media? The Fed lied to us and said that it was $5 trillion that they gave to the American banks, but the number was nearly $30 trillion in 2 years. Then the lending since April of 2020 has averaged about $1 trillion a week. It's now at $1.6 trillion a week. I'll explain in a second. If you happen to be watching the Blaze, Stu, look up at the monitor. I want to show you a chart. This is the chart of the Fed lending. If you look to the left, you will see a flat line. And then around 2008, you'll see a little blip, right? Mm-hmm. That's $30 trillion, that little blip. You can barely see it.
Okay, yeah.
Then around 2014, you'll see that that this is quantitative easing. Mm-hmm. Okay? Look what happens at 2019. You want to talk about Al Gore hockey stick.
It looks like the Omicron chart.
Right. There is until 2008, they never did this before. And then they tried to keep it as low as possible. That is $1.6 trillion every week. I said last week on the special that it was $1 trillion. It's not. It's now $1.6 trillion. Now, here's the thing that you have to understand. This is the Fed giving money to the banks, to, J.P. Morgan Chase, not only Chase, but J.P. Morgan. This is the Fed giving it to these big institutions. Now, what they're saying is, well, it's this according to the New York Times. While it's massive and unprecedented, it doesn't drive general price inflation because, now listen to this, because the banks borrow this money from the Fed only to redeposit it at the Fed. Now, first of all, the banks, the 5 big banks or the banks that are left, those are the Fed. That is the Fed, okay? So the banks are made up in 12, strangely, districts. And those 12 districts, those banks, they form the Fed. So the Fed owns the banks, or does the bank own the Fed? But it's the same thing, okay? Why would they ask for $1.6 trillion every day, and they can keep that money for 90 days now is the official number, and they take it and say, we need $1.6 trillion tonight. Okay, here it is. Okay, thank you. Listen, I'd like to put this in my bank account at the Fed. Okay, here it is, $1.6 trillion. What the hell is that? The New York Times doesn't even talk about it. They don't explain it because it's never been done before. It's never been done before. Now, remember, they said $5 trillion and the number was 30. Experts are saying they don't think that money was ever paid back. And it wasn't just to America. $3 trillion went to the Bank of Japan. $2 trillion went to the banks in Germany. This is our money, gang. This is our money. So what is it? The central planners and the Fed have to keep the currency flowing into the financial system. This is why it's going to take $100 trillion to fight global climate. They need that money. They're doing it, and they're going to do it with a Fed coin. That's what will replace our currency. And I know that's hard for people to believe, but it is coming because they must have control. The only way to slow inflation at this point, think grocery stores, gas stations, and everything else, while continuing to fund the financial institutions and the big government projects. Inflation is inevitable, but they think they can control where it happens. They want it to be limited to Wall Street, housing, and other things linked to the financial institutions. They don't want it everywhere because you'll notice and you'll be like, what the hell are you people doing? So they are making changes to the entire world, the entire Western world with the Great Reset. It is really impossible to do this, but they think they can do it. And they're doing it through modern monetary theory. You can print as much money as you want, but you have to control inflation by funneling money through what they believe is the right part of the economy and impose taxes and price controls on the wrong part of economy. That is why they want a Fed coin. That is why they want to know exactly what you're doing with your bank account, because they're going to have to stop you from doing the things you want to do. This is all in the book, The Great Reset. Go to glennbeck.com right now. You'll find places that will take your order. I'm telling you now, I said this before, there's a paper shortage and everything else. This is going to sell out. I never thought it would sell out this fast. It was gone in the first 2 days. There was nothing left in the first 2 days. We have ordered many more books, and they're coming at the end of this month. They will be delivered to you by the end of this month. You've got to order it now, or you're going to miss this one too. And it is imperative, please. Time is of the essence.